방문하신 것을 환영합니다. 개회식을 본격적으로 시작하기 전에 전통과 현재가 공존하는 대한민국의 모습을 담은 홍보 영상을 시청하시겠습니다. 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 잠시만 기다려 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 안녕하십니까? 대한민국을 방문하신 것을 다시 한번 환영합니다. 먼저 인사드리겠습니다. 저는 제1회 아시아 태평양 보호관찰 국제회의 개회식 사회를 맡은 법무부 푸르미 방송국 아나운서 김나연입니다. 감사합니다. 그럼 전통과 현재가 공존하는 대한민국의 모습을 담은 홍보 영상을 한 편 더 시청하도록 하겠습니다.
To prepare for a new tomorrow, to welcome our new selves. We are breathing new life into a place we already know so well. Come and experience the energy. We are ready.
영상을 시청하셨습니다. 그럼 지금부터 제1회 아시아 태평양 보호관찰 국제회의 개회식을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 먼저 개최국인 대한민국의 윤웅장 범죄예방정책국장님의 개회사가 있겠습니다. 큰 박수로 환영해 주시기 바랍니다.
안녕하십니까. 저는 이번 아시아 태평양 보호관찰 국제 컨퍼런스를 주관하는 대한민국 범죄예방정책국 윤웅장 국장입니다. 먼저 제1회 아시아 태평양 보호관찰 국제회의를 대한민국에서 개최하게 된 것을 무한한 영광으로 생각합니다. 이번 회의를 위해 아시아 태평양 지역 8개국에서 참석해 주신 30명의 외국 대표단 여러분께도 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 기조 강연을 해주실 미국 뉴욕 시립대 존 제이 칼리지의 잼 멜로우 교수님과 각 세션 발표를 맡아주신 동국대학교 조윤호 교수님, 경기대학교 김병배 교수님, 그리고 국내 여러 학자분들께도 깊은 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 국내의 귀빈 여러분, 그동안 세계 여러 지역의 보호관찰 분야 국제 교류는 활발했던 반면에 아시아 태평양 지역은 상대적으로 그렇지 못하였습니다. 대한민국 범죄예방정책국은 이 지역 보호관찰 분야에 활발한 교류를 기대하면서 제1회 아시아 태평양 보호관찰 국제회의를 개최하게 되었습니다. 이번 국제회의의 주제는 사회 내 처우를 통한 범죄인 재활 및 공공안전 증진입니다. 이번 회의를 통해 아시아 태평양 국가 간의 사회 내 처우 제도 분야의 협력을 강화하고 보호관찰 분야 각국의 제도와 정책, 정보 등에 대한 실질적이고 정기적인 교류가 이루어지기를 희망합니다. 존경하는 국내 참가자 여러분, 이번 회의의 세션 A와 E에서는 아시아 태평양 국가 간 사회 내 처우 제도의 비교와 국제협력 구축을 주체로 발표와 토론이 있을 예정입니다. 특히 세션 2의 국장급 회의에서는 아시아 태평양 보호관찰 국제회의의 정례화와 국가 간 상시 연락망 구축 등 협력 체계를 지속할 방안이 논의될 것입니다. BCD 세션에서는 각국의 팬데믹 상황에서의 보호관찰 지도 감독, 첨단 기술의 적용, 지역사회의 민간 협력 방안 등이 논의될 예정입니다. 전체 일정의 마지막 날에는 서울보관찰소와 위치추적 중앙관제센터 방문 프로그램이 예정되어 있습니다. 두 기관의 방문을 통해 대한민국의 보호관찰 제도와 전자감독 제도에 대해서 더 잘 이해할 수 있는 기회가 되시기를 희망합니다. 끝으로 대한민국 범죄예방정책국에서는 각국 대표들께서 한국에 체류하시는 동안 불편함이 없도록 적극적으로 도와드릴 것임을 약속드립니다. 다시 한번 제1회 아시아 태평양 보호관찰 국제회의에 참석하신 각국 대표단께 진심으로 감사를 드리며 여러분 모두의 건강과 행복을 기원합니다. 감사합니다.
감사합니다. 윤웅장 범죄예방정책국장님의 개회사가 있었습니다. 다음은 이노공 대한민국 법무부 차관님의 환영사가 있겠습니다. 큰 박수로 환영해 주시기 바랍니다.
존경하는 각국 대표단 여러분, 그리고 국내 참가자 여러분, 대한민국 법무부 차관 이노공입니다. 제1회 아시아 태평양 보호관찰 국제회의 개막을 맞아 주최국의 법무부 차관으로서 대한민국 법무부와 범죄예방정책국을 대표하여 여러분 모두에게 따뜻한 환영의 말씀을 드리게 된 것을 무한한 영광으로 생각합니다. 먼저 이번 국제회의를 위해 대한민국을 찾아주신 호주, 일본, 말레이시아, 몽골, 뉴질랜드, 필리핀, 싱가포르, 태국 등 8개국 대표단과 기조연설자인 미국 제프 멜로우 교수님께 깊은 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 법무부와 공동 개최를 위해 힘써주신 한국보호관찰학회 이수정 교수님께도 심심한 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 친애하는 각국 대표단 여러분, 그리고 국내 참가자 여러분, 20세기 후반부터 아시아를 비롯한 세계 여러 국가의 범죄자 처우 정책은 기존 구금 중심의 시설 내 처우에서 보호관찰 등 사회 내 처우로 옮겨가고 있는 추세입니다. 이번 국제회의를 통해서도 아시아 태평양 국가의 사회 내 처우 제도에 대한 서로의 장단점에 대해 가감없는 토론을 통해 건설적인 발전을 이뤄낼 것을 제안합니다. 여기에 모이신 각국 대표단을 통해 아시아 태평양 국가 사회 내 처우 제도 성공과 실패 사례를 논의하고 또 서로 배워갈 수 있기를 기대합니다. 더 나아가 이번 회의 이후에도 각국의 정책을 신속 정확하게 교환하는 것이 무엇보다 중요하다는 점을 강조하고 싶습니다. 그런 의미에서 이번 이 국자급 회의를 통해 지속 가능한 협력 체계 구축을 위한 다양한 형태의 합의가 도출되기를 간절히 바랍니다. 친애한 대표단 여러분, 앞으로 4일의 회의 기간 동안 여러분께서 머무실 서울은 대한민국의 수도로서 오랜 역사와 전통, 자연과 인간, 그리고 과거와 현재가 조화롭게 공존하는 매우 아름다운 도시입니다. 이곳에 머무르시는 동안 바쁘시더라도 회의의 공식 일정상 방문하시는 곳 이외에도 틈틈이 서울의 다양한 볼거리를 체험해 보시면 좋을 것 같습니다. 끝으로 이번 회의는 주최국인 한국뿐만 아니라 아시아 태평양 지역 참가국 전체가 지난 1년 동안 적극적인 협력을 아끼지 않은 결과로 개최된 것입니다. 이번 회의 준비를 통해 노고가 많으셨던 대한민국 법무부 범죄예방정책국장 윤웅장 국장님과 직원 여러분들께 이 자리를 빌어 다시 한번 깊은 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 각국 대표단께서 대한민국 서울에 오신 것을 다시 한번 진심으로 환영합니다. 여러분 모두의 건강과 행복을 기원합니다. 감사합니다.
이노공 대한민국 법무부 차관님께서 환영사를 해주셨습니다. 차관님께서는 개회식은 물론이고 오늘 저녁에 있을 만찬도 주관하실 예정입니다. 다시 한번 감사의 박수 부탁드립니다. 이어서 다음은 이수정 한국보호관찰학회장님의 환영사가 있겠습니다. 큰 박수로 모시겠습니다.
안녕하십니까. 한국보호관찰학회 회장 이수정입니다. 여러 나라에서 귀빈들을 모신 연유로 영어 인사 말씀을 잠시 드리도록 하겠습니다. Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable representatives from each Ministry of Justice, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Soo-jung Lee, as the Korean Probation Society's president and co-organizer of this conference with Korean Ministry of Justice. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to Asian Pacific Probation International Conference. Let me go back to Korean. Please translate as previously prepared. 친애하는 대표단 여러분, 코로나 팬데믹은 사회 내 처우 분야에 큰 영향을 미쳤습니다. 사람과 사람 간의 대면을 기본으로 하는 보호관찰이 크게 위축되었습니다. 이는 우리 사회 내 처우 제도의 집행 방식과 효과성에 대해 근본적인 질문을 던졌습니다. 그 결과로 세계의 사회과학과 범죄학 분야의 다수의 학자들이 전통적인 대면 방식의 지도 감독이 아닌 통신 수단을 활용한 원격 보호 관찰 등 새로운 방식의 보호 관찰의 가능성과 효과성에 대해 관심을 가지는 계기가 되었습니다. 그러한 의미에서 미국 제프 멜로우 교수님의 팬데믹 이후의 보호 관찰 지도 감독을 주제로 하는 기조연설은 이러한 우리의 정책적인 고민에 통찰과 방향성을 제시해 주실 것입니다. 친애하는 각국 대표단 그리고 국내 참가자 여러분, 저는 이번 제1회 아시아 태평양 보호관찰 국제회의에 각 세션이 최근의 시대적 상황과 범죄학 연구의 세계적인 동향을 적절히 반영하고 있다고 생각합니다. 이러한 의미 있는 세션에 각 참가국에서 총 21건의 발제를 해주실 예정입니다. 세션 A에서는 한국의 노일석 과장님과 호주의 케빈 코크란 청장님 등 7분께서 각국의 보호관찰 제도에 대해 발표해 주시겠습니다. 세션 B에서는 태국의 한파리판 국장님 등 3분께서 각국의 팬데믹 상황에서의 보호관찰 지도 감독에 대해서 발표해 주실 예정입니다. 세션 C에서는 뉴질랜드 안나 혹스 등 7분께서 전자감독과 인공지능 등 첨단 과학기술의 사회 내 처우 분야의 적용 가능성에 대해서 발표하실 예정입니다. 세션 D에서는 일본의 와타나베 히로유키님 등 5분께서 보호관찰 분야 지역사회 민간 자원 활용과 민관 협력을 주제로 발표하실 예정입니다. 이 모든 세션을 더욱 풍요롭게 만들어주신 발표자분들의 열정과 노고에 다시 한번 감사의 말씀 드립니다. We are very grateful to all presenters for their hard work and enthusiasm in enriching each session. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an infinite honor to host the international conference where participants and presenters from different countries can discuss and meet in person. It's like the Avengers assembling, but instead of superhero capes, we wear superhero knowledge and expertise. So let's not limit ourselves to exchanging pleasantries between organizations within each country. Let's break free from those bureaucrat chains and encourage interactions between academics and private professionals. 끝으로 여기 참가하신 모든 분들께 특히 여러 가지 현실적인 어려움에도 불구하고 이번 국제회의를 성공적으로 개최하기 위해서 준비해 주신 인호공 차관님, 그리고 윤웅장 국장님, 그리고 실무자들께 진심 어린 감사와 응원의 마음을 전달합니다. 감사합니다.
감사합니다. 이수정 한국보호관찰학회장님의 환영사였습니다. 다음은 기조 연설이 있겠습니다. 이번 대회를 빛내주시기 위해 미국 뉴욕 시립대의 제프 멜로 교수님께서 영상으로 참여해 주셨습니다. 참고로 제프 멜로 교수님께서는 교정 처우 및 범죄자 재활 관련 형사정책 등을 전문적으로 연구하셨습니다. 특히 한국의 보호관찰 제도에 대한 연구를 수행하신 경력이 있어서 한국과 뜻깊은 인연을 맺고 있습니다. 그럼 제프 멜로 교수님의 기조 연설을 청해 듣겠습니다.
I'd like to thank the Korean Ministry of Justice and the Korean Association of Probation and Parole Services for the invitation to participate in the first Asian Pacific Probation Conference. I'm a professor in the Department of Criminal Justice at John Jay College in New York City. For more than 20 years, I've worked with correctional and community correctional agencies with the goal of improving the successful outcomes of those under supervision. It's therefore an honor to give a keynote address on what I've learned researching and providing technical assistance to probation and parole agencies. I hope that some of my insights will be the catalyst for further conversation during this conference and hopefully confirm what many of you, as the true experts, already know about what's needed to supervise and rehabilitate individuals in your communities. The theme for this conference is the power of synergy, promoting rehabilitation and public safety through non-custodial measures. In the brief time I have with you today, I'd like to discuss with you some of my thoughts on synergy, both in the traditional sense of the term, which comes from the Greek word for working together, and as the organizational expert Stephen Covey defines it as, combining your strengths to achieve goals that would otherwise be impossible for individuals to achieve. The COVID pandemic has made us more aware of the need for technological synergy, meaning when technology's benefits extend from one organization to another, so that the advanced technology can improve the overall efficiency and performance of an agency. It also can be defined as the degree of fit between the existing technological skills of an agency staff and their clients, and the technological skills needed to produce successful outcomes. Let me begin with 3 reasons why best practices in probation parole require a synergistic approach, where there is a collaborative working relationship between community corrections and the public, private, and non-governmental sectors. First, community correction agencies always face limited resources. In more than 2 decades in this field, I've never heard a director of probation or parole say they have enough staff or budget for all the work they need to do to supervise and help rehabilitate individuals. And in truth, government authorities in many countries are either unable or unwilling to adequately fund their community correctional system. So from a resource perspective, providing services to probationers and parolees cannot be the sole responsibility of community corrections. In other words, community corrections cannot afford to do it alone. A collaborative approach is essential to addressing the normal budgetary constraints that restrict an agency's ability to effectively offer all the rehabilitative services needed. Second, rehabilitating criminal justice-involved individuals is exceedingly complex, and we should not envision that probation parole staff have every skill and expertise to address all of their clients' needs. One of the first questions I ask agencies is to think about what services are needed to address the barriers their clients face as they return to the community. Then I ask them if their agency has the capacity and resources to address them all. Affordable housing, cognitive behavioral interventions, educational classes, vocational training, employment, healthcare services, mental health services, and substance abuse treatment are just some of the services these individuals may require. I do not know of an agency that has the expertise to provide all these services. A synergistic approach for monitoring and rehabilitating probationers and parolees requires strong and effective relationships with other human service organizations, local police, releasing authorities, community groups, public hospitals, just to name a few, to support successful rehabilitation. Once we acknowledge this, it further supports the need for a synergistic approach to rehabilitation. Third, community correctional agencies will be more successful when the community supports the rehabilitation and reintegration of criminal justice involved individuals. This means that probation and parole agencies need to make a concerted effort to develop strong, ongoing working relationships with the community and their leaders, especially communities with disproportionately high rates of probationers and parolees. On many occasions, I've seen residents oppose a new neighborhood probation office, halfway house, shelter, and/or food pantry in their neighborhood, fearing that crime will go up and their property values will go down. Many times, the residents' fear and opposition could have been alleviated if community leaders and residents had been actively involved with probation or parole authorities before these issues came up. The Volunteer Probation Officers Program, which assists parole and probation officers in countries like Japan, Korea, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand, is a great example of community engagement with community correctional agencies. These types of programs are one way of empowering community members to make their local community a better place by supporting a person's rehabilitation. Likewise, information campaigns such as Singapore's Yellow Ribbon Project can positively influence a community's mindset towards giving the formerly incarcerated a second chance. Messaging that their communities will be safer when the public and private sector collaborates with community corrections in the rehabilitation and reintegration of criminal justice involved individuals is essential. Often, government officials will fund more rehabilitative programs if they believe that the community supports giving probationers and parolees a second chance. Let me also take some time to reflect on two other topics of this conference: probation in the pandemic and the use of advanced technologies in community corrections. In particular, I want to point out how the more contemporary definition of technological synergy can help us address these three best practices in the midst of COVID and beyond. Clearly, the global COVID pandemic produced a wave of technological synergy in community corrections. I, for example, recorded this keynote address on Zoom, something I would not have thought about doing prior to the pandemic. Remote communications between community correctional officers and their clients increased exponentially, whether it was by telephone, smartphone, text messaging, email, or video conferencing. Though the pandemic took a terrible toll on our lives, it also offered a natural experiment on the benefits and challenges of moving to remote supervision to prevent the spread of the virus. These last few years have helped us better understand how technology can be used successfully to change and modernize community corrections. My colleagues, Deborah Ketzel and Craig Schwab, surveyed more than 1,000 probation and parole officers in the United States at the height of the pandemic to see how contact and case management approaches changed during the pandemic. I participated with them in the replication of their study in Chile and in Thailand, along with colleagues from those two countries. These three studies help us understand the positive impact technological synergy can have on addressing key challenges in community corrections. While at the same time, we need to be mindful that the expected successful outcomes of using advanced technologies is often dependent on the degree of technological synergy of a country, the region within a country, and even at the local agency level. In the United States, Ketzel and Schwab found that community correctional officers reported that the majority of probation and parole clients had access to multiple forms of communication technologies, with 70% access to a smartphone and 42% with a home computer with internet. The good news from the study is that even though face-to-face contact stopped during the pandemic, probation and parole officers reported that the frequency of their client contact stayed the same from pre-COVID levels. What was more interesting was that in their study, they found that the clients who had access to video conferencing, not just a telephone or email, had more contact with their probation and parole officer and treatment-oriented case management. This study provides additional evidence that remote supervision, particularly video conferencing, may be a beneficial tool when supervising probationers and parolees. First, it can help to reduce the number of in-person meetings that are required. This can be a major advantage for the officers and their clients. Officers can save time and money by not having to travel to meet with low-risk clients, and clients can avoid the inconvenience of having to always go to the probation or parole office, which can oftentimes interfere with their pro-social activities like going to work or school. Checking in with one's community correctional officer can take hours out of the day. When you factor in travel time to the office, sitting in the office waiting to be called, then the face-to-face meeting, which often amounts to little more than being asked the same few obligatory questions before having to travel back to work or home. In my own conversation with a probation officer, she found her clients during the pandemic were more comfortable speaking to her by video conferencing, as they felt that they had more privacy than when they spoke to her in the office. Many would check in from their job during their lunch break, and she even changed her own working hours to come in later so she could speak with them remotely once they got off from work. Though more research is required to confirm Kessel and Schwab's preliminary findings, one can understand how the client seeing their probation and parole officer remotely can help them feel more connected and less isolated than by communicating via phone, email, or text messaging, while also reducing time and travel requirements. What we must be mindful about, however, is that technology is a tool and not a panacea. And community correctional agencies need to ensure that there's a fit between the advanced technology being implemented and the technological skills of the probation and parole officers and their clients. In our study in Chile with Sebastian Galleguillos, probation officers reported only 44% of their clients had access to emails and smartphones, with only 24% having a computer with access to the internet. In Thailand, our study with Thanapan Numpang at Thailand's Department of Probation found the access to communication technology was even lower, with probation officers reporting 30% of the probationers had access to smartphones, 7% text messaging, and only 1% had access to video conferencing. However, even with lower levels of technological access by their clients than in the United States, probation officers in Chile and Thailand also saw a sharp rise during COVID in telephone calls being used to keep in contact with probationers. In Thailand, prior to COVID, officers reported calling clients on average 2 to 3 times a month, in addition to their in-person meetings. During COVID, when face-to-face contact became more difficult, our study found they were speaking by phone with probationers more than once per week. And just as interesting, the average level of supervision strategies, especially accountability case management, were higher when clients were spoken to via telephone than when not. We need to acknowledge the disparities in access to technology and how this may impact the officer-client relationship. One can imagine how clients on the same probation officer's caseload may have difficult outcomes based in part on whether one had access to communicate remotely, while another had to come to the office for every meeting. We should also recognize that the technological divide can be great even among community correctional agencies and local offices. In some countries I've worked with, officers rarely use email, let alone more advanced remote communication technology. Finally, let us also be mindful that other research indicates that remote communication versus in-person meetings can cause difficulties in assessing client behavior, conducting risk assessments, and holding clients accountable, especially those who are high risk. Of course, technology means much more than the use of remote communication technology. Conversation about synergy in advanced technology cannot be complete without acknowledging the importance of the interagency synergy that community correctional agencies can generate through data collection, data utilization, and data sharing. We know that an agency's policies and practices must be informed by local data. However, all too often we forget the need for a more comprehensive data-driven understanding that includes all the different agencies and service providers working with probationers and parolees. It is not enough, however, for a community correctional agency to record only basic data on their population, such as employment status, programmatic participation, drug testing, conducting, and risk need scores. A clear understanding of the local rehabilitation and reintegration landscape is needed to establish policies, practices, and programs that reflect local realities, including political and legal constraints. Based on my work with the National Institute of Corrections Transition from Jail to the Community Initiative, we found that community correctional agencies need to collect the following baseline information if they are committed to developing appropriate collaborative-based interventions. First, assess the characteristics of their population, local crime problems and existing laws, and policies that govern various aspects of rehabilitation and reintegration. Second, identify the specific geographic areas to which the probation and parolees live in the community. Third, identify those subsets of the probation and parole population likely to consume disproportionate criminal justice and programmatic resources. Fourth, identify resources that can be leveraged to address key issues and the appropriate action steps to remove potential obstacles. And finally, track service referrals, engagement and use, and share that information with partner agencies on a regular basis. In all honesty, these 5 data collection items cannot be done efficiently and effectively without utilizing advanced technologies. Agencies that rely on paper records, which can only be retrieved manually and are extremely time-consuming to analyze, have a more difficult time developing collaborative interventions. The power of synergy will only be realized when the data can be easily extracted, analyzed, shared, and presented in easy-to-comprehend reports. This requires a management information system, also referred to as an automated data system, which is designed to collect and exchange data electronically within and between partnering agencies. Though automated data systems require training, support, and maintenance, its advantages far outweigh the time and resources it takes to implement it. Picture an electronic data system that provides your agency the ease of regularly measuring results of programs, organizations, and individuals. For example, it could collect individual data, including program participation, education, employment, and disciplinary problems. Examine risk need scores of recidivism to assist with classification and program placement decisions for future probationers and parolees. And assess the differences in recidivism rates of program participants versus non-participants, or those who are and who are not under electronic monitoring. Evaluate the effect of educational employment programs, as well as substance abuse and mental health treatment on recidivism rates. An electronic data system becomes integrated when agencies like community corrections, law enforcement, courts, prisons, medical providers, and other community-based organizations working with the same population have the ability to access and share information electronically. This is the power and promise of technological synergy. I understand that this can be difficult to do as agencies are often concerned about privacy laws. Recognizing the privacy concerns, agencies have developed firewalls so only those who have permission and a password have access to the data. In addition, agencies can establish a unique identifier other than a federal number, which could help track the individual without the loss of privacy or increase stigmatization that could occur through use and accidental release of a federal identification number. The ultimate goal is to enhance the ability of criminal justice involved individuals to be successfully rehabilitated and reintegrated into society. Think about informing providers about these probationers or parolees with a history of homelessness, mental illness, or substance abuse, and sharing case management plans with providers could facilitate their rehabilitation. At a push of a button, your agency can get data on what was achieved, how efficiently it was done, and how did other agencies and providers help with the effort. So in closing, let us always remember that successful rehabilitation and reintegration will only be possible when we develop a synergistic approach to probation and parole. And let me call on all of you to think of this conference as a way to learn from one another and to recognize the overwhelming importance of working together, whether it is within your own agency or with the public, private, and non-governmental sectors. I know that your agencies are already doing this type of work, in sharing your successes and challenges with one another will help you create and reinforce a collaborative culture throughout Asia and the Pacific to support best practices in the supervision and rehabilitation of those under your supervision. And finally, let's not forget the value of technology in supporting our goals of supporting public safety and fostering rehabilitation. We need to continue to identify and evaluate the effectiveness of different technologies to help facilitate positive behavioral change, to hold your clients accountable, and to improve operational effectiveness. Thank you so much. I very much enjoyed speaking with you today.
네, 제프 멜로 교수님의 기조 연설을 청해 들으셨습니다. 제프 멜로 교수님께서는 이번 행사에 꼭 참석하고 싶어 하셨습니다만 바쁘신 일정 관계로 참석하지 못하셔서 많이 아쉬워하셨는데요. 이렇게 영상으로 유익한 내용을 담아 기조 연설을 보내주신 제프 멜로 교수님께 감사의 말씀드립니다. 그럼 이어서 개회식 공식 행사의 마지막 순서로 전체 기념 촬영이 있겠습니다. 기념 촬영을 위해 자리를 정돈하는 동안 잠시만 기다려주시면 감사하겠습니다. 네, 각국 참가국 대표분들과 내빈분들께서는 지금 무대 앞으로 나와주시면 감사하겠습니다. 네, 각국 참가국 대표분들과 내빈분들께서는 지금 무대 앞으로 나와서 기념 촬영에 응해 주시기 바랍니다. (2열에는) 본부 과장님 및 학회 임원님들께서 서주시면 감사하겠습니다. (3열에는) 기관장분들께서 서주시면 감사하겠습니다. 네, (2열에는) 본부 과장님 및 학회 임원분들께서 서주시면 감사하겠습니다. 그리고 (3열에는) 기관장분들께서 서주시면 감사하겠습니다. 네, 2열에는 본부 과장님 및 학회 임원님들께서 서주시면 감사하겠고요. 3열에는 기관장님들께서 서주시면 감사하겠습니다. 사이사이 보이게 서주시면 감사하겠습니다. 네, 어깨 사이사이로 얼굴이 보일 수 있게 서주시면 감사하겠습니다. 네, 감사합니다. 이것으로 제1회 아시아 태평양 보호관찰 국제회의 개회식 행사를 모두 마치겠습니다. 잠시 휴식 시간을 가진 후 같은 장소에서 세션별 주제에 따른 발표를 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 그리고 참고로 쉬는 시간 중에 복도에 전시되어 있는 한국 전자감독 제도 홍보 부스에도 많은 관심 가져주시기 바랍니다. 감사합니다.